All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Strange, Dark, and Related podcast. This is episode 3. I am your host, Elfie, and with me today are the Relateds. So, Relateds, I have a question for you. Uh, I want you to say your name and then tell me what is the best kind of pie. So, I'll go first while you guys think. Uh, I'm Elfie, and I think the best kind of pie is like that Dutch apple pie with like the crumble like on top, but it has to be like right out of the oven, like still hot. It's not as good if it's reheated.
Oh, this is a hard question. So this is Willow, and um, I'm gonna go controversial, and I'm gonna go cheesecake because I do consider cheesecake a pie and not a cake.
Is there like a particular flavor that you like?
No, I like New York style, so just plain because then you can add and yeah, you can add whatever else you want
Nice.
depending on your mood. Yeah.
Nice.
This is Anne, and my favorite pie would have to be a berry pie with the lattice work on top. And it has to have like a really good crust that's like flaky and really good and doesn't like fall apart as soon as like you scoop it out.
Mhm.
Okay. Hi, my name is Levi, and hands down, pumpkin pie
Okay, but with or without whipped cream?
with whipped cream, of course.
Of course.
Obviously, she's not a monster. Please.
Wait, from the can or the like Cool Whip from the tub?
Or homemade. Homemade.
Oh,
Homemade,
Homemade
the
is
w-
pretty
the
good.
way that Willow makes it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank Levi.
Advertising Willow.
All right. So what I'm hearing is next time we have this podcast, Willow's going to be making pumpkin pie with homemade whipped cream for everyone.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. I'm looking forward to the
We'll
next
all just
episode.
be eating pumpkin pie.
All right. So today I wanted to talk about something that is always dark. It's sometimes creepy. But I think everyone gets scared at some point. And the topic is nighttime. So I think everyone can agree that nighttime, like, I don't know why, but it's just like as soon as the sun goes down, it's dark. It's just everything becomes like increasingly creepy. And I think we can all agree that it is way scarier to watch like a scary movie when it's dark outside than in broad daylight,
Agreed.
regardless if you're doing it like alone or with other people. So what do you guys think? Why is nighttime so creepy?
I think it's because you don't know what's in the shadows.
Yeah. I personally think that it's about how your mind can play tricks on you in the dark, or it's a lot easier to hide, to move around, so you get more paranoid,
Mm-hmm.
thinking something flying by, like a bird, just like, what? Someone in our house? Someone in our backyard? When it's just a bird or a rat or a possum.
A rat flying by? That would be pretty
Yes.
terrifying, day or night.
Levi, those are called flying squirrels, okay?
Like a rat skittering, possums.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's a good point where like the mind can play tricks on you. I think that we rely so heavily on our sense of sight that when you can't really see things, um I don't know, I feel like if you're always using sight as like your main sense, then when you can't see, you're still trying to use your eyes to see everything instead of relying on your other senses, right? Especially like being able to hear things. And because your other senses are heightened and like you don't really uh use that sense as much, now it's like you hear some creepy things that you probably like have heard during the day, you just didn't realize that you heard it. And so now it just seems like infinitely creepier because you're just like, what is that? I don't know what that is. And then your mind goes wild.
Yeah, there's like a
Also,
cat is in the background.
yeah. But I also think that there might be things that you don't hear during the day that because all the nocturnal animals come out, right?
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
it
that's
could
true.
also be that you're hearing things that you don't normally hear. So you are hearing like the raccoons and the possums and all of those nocturnal animals. And you hear like the skittering. You don't know what it is. You see movement, like your eye catches movement, but you're like, what is it? And you look and you're like, oh, I can't see anything over there. And like Levi said, it does, like, your mind does play tricks on you, right? Like your mind is trying to logically like imagine and see things there, and it can't see very well, and so it's trying to take in clues, and it might create things that aren't there. But I think also imagination, right? Like if you're sitting there, and I feel like the older that you get, the more information that you have, and so your brain is trying to connect things, and so you see something and you're like, a murderer. Right? And I don't know, I mean, it's been a long time since I was very young and a child, and I don't know if I was more scared as a child or if certain things scare me more now as an adult. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um I don't know the level of worry that I have. And also, kind of interestingly, like, are kids naturally afraid of the dark? Is that a natural fear, or is that something that is learned from adults? So, yeah.
Well, I think that it's something that is mostly conditioned. I mean, if you think about like movies, where do the villains hide? They hide in the darkness. They're always darker features. They're always darker, like color schemes, things along those lines. Um, I think that to Elfie's point, I don't necessarily think that it's because we don't use our other senses. I think that it's we specifically use the sense of sight to be able to identify stuff. So, and classify it whether or not it is a danger. So, like during the day, you can hear things, but you can like identify that's probably like a squirrel or a bird, but you always look to see whether or not it is a danger. So you like have to be able to like officially identify it and be like, okay, that's classified as not a danger. Now I can just move on my merry day. But with the limited sense of sight, you can't actually identify a lot of the sounds most of the time. And so without the ability to identify and classify danger or not danger, it, like Levi says, make you a little bit more paranoid just because there isn't that sort of like classification and like settling of those like paranoia. And then it just kind of builds from that point. Because if you're paranoid about one thing and then you hear something else, then you're just like, oh, it kind of like builds from there.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. And so I think as a female, like I was always raised to believe that like the night is like when the most horrible things happen. Like, oh, if you're gonna get raped, it's gonna happen at night. If you're gonna get murdered, it's gonna happen at night. You're gonna get kidnapped at night. It's like someone's gonna come into the house and snatch you from your bed at night, right? And it's like all these scenarios are always like, oh, all these horrible things are gonna happen at night. And so I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if women see or feel more afraid at night than men do, right? If they feel more fear at night than men do, simply because of right the way that you're raised and always being told like all
Be
these horrible
careful.
things. Yeah, all these horrible things can happen to you at night.
I also wonder if like the true crime stuff just adds to that.
Explain.
Um, so I am a fan of true crime, and I find it very interesting and fascinating. But I found that I had to stop listening to it because it just started entering my life too much. in just like everyday things. Not related to true crime, but just a simple example. I had to read the book Hot Zone, and it's about the Ebola virus. And at the time, and I was a procrastinator at school, so I read it all in one night for a test that I had on it. And the next morning, after pulling an all nighter and reading the book in one day, um, I worked at a coffee shop at the time, and one drop of milk shot out when I was steaming milk, shot out of the little canister I was steaming milk in and landed in my eye. 100% freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die of Ebola now. Um, and it was just because like the Ebola thing was in my mind from the night before. So I found that like true crime also led into playing into some of those fears and being in my mind. Um, yeah. So I had to stop all of that true crime watching and listening to podcasts and that sort of thing just because it entered my psyche too much, I guess.
All right. Elfie, you asked about like if boys feel the same. I have a lot of friends who are males, and they're always like, "Why do you need to go before sundown?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're a boy. You don't really have that fear of going out in the dark and all that scary stuff happening to you." So I feel like some males, or at least the ones that I've been hanging out with, they're like not afraid of it since they haven't been taught or raised that way. So I think maybe our parents teaching us about the dangers of the outside, about the dark and that such, and that made us be afraid of what's to come, and that led us through our childhood and into adulthood being paranoid about the dark.
That's
Yeah,
really
that's
interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if also has to do with like size too, kind of going off of Levi's point. I have had some conversation with my guy friends about um if they get scared in certain situations as well. And there are situations that do scare them, right? But I don't think inherently like walking to the car would make them concerned, right? If you have to walk through like a darker place. Um, but I think it also helps if you're like a 6'3" man versus a 5'1" woman, right? And I feel like that also could just help in terms of how they feel in the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that you're right. A lot of I do hear a lot of men say like, like if they're like really buff or if they're not, then, they always think that whoever the bigger person is who would win in a fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one ever asks, okay, well, who's been in more fights? Who, has anyone received any sort of like self-defense or like, fighting training? That's never the question. It's always like, oh, well, that person's bigger, so therefore they must win the fight. And so I think because women are typically smaller, it's just automatically assumed that if there were to be an altercation between a woman and someone larger than her, regardless if it's a man, woman, non-binary, whatever, right? Um, then that aggressor would automatically win simply because they're larger.
Yeah. And I think the same goes for like children too, right? Because like children are smaller. Very squirmy though. Gotta hold on, make sure they don't fall.
So I have a question for you guys. Do you feel like, so I know that I've done some self-defense training, and I feel like to like a certain extent I'd be able to hold my own in like a dangerous situation. But I feel like I still have those same fears, and I still take those like safety precautions. So, like, do you guys feel like whatever experience you have like makes you less afraid? Or is it just one of those things where like it's just, I guess my question is, do you feel like a female who is trained in self-defense and things along those lines would have less fears? Because I don't feel like they would in my experience.
That does make a good point, since I feel like it depends on the experiences they had. Like, let's say they chose to train and become stronger because they wanted to, and that was their lifestyle. Their parents taught them how to train, how to be like that to protect themselves already at young. So they didn't need that fear. So I feel like that would be a less fear of the dark. But if someone had an experience of going down a dark alley, of being in that situation and coming out of it, wanting to train themselves to never have that feeling again, it would be more of a fear, turning into a phobia, and not wanting to go outside, not wanting to go out in the dark at night anytime, even though they are trained to protect themselves.
Or even, Levi, maybe even more motivation, right? Because they've felt that fear, whatever that was, and then just more motivation to not ever feel that vulnerable again, right?
Yes, but I feel like the fear would not change. They would still be afraid, even though now they know.
Mm-hmm.
But they know extreme dangers of that now, since they were put in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Levi. I definitely think that if someone experiences a trauma, that fear is going to be there, right? And I think that fear is increased with not working through that trauma, right? So, however you want to work through it, like therapist, or if you already have like techniques, maybe you're just very familiar with like trauma, it usually helps speaking to someone and having someone help you like through that trauma. But yeah, especially if that trauma is like unresolved, it definitely can increase that fear. And even though you have trained and you know how to defend yourself, it won't necessarily make that fear go away, because it doesn't make, just because you know how to defend yourself doesn't mean that if you're presented, or if you're in a situation where you need to defend yourself, that you're guaranteed to come out unscathed, right? I think that I mean, I have some self-defense training, and I would say that the one thing that I learned from doing self-defense training is I don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I know very little. And having a little bit of training, yes, I have an edge over someone who doesn't have that training. But if I'm put up against someone who has the same amount or even more training than I do, yeah, the odds are stacked against me. And even though I know how to defend myself, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be successful in doing so, right? I mean, I could talk about this for like hours and hours and hours, but
well, and Elfie, kind of going off of that too, I think my thought is, yes, you can have the training, but it also, like, sometimes you're just gonna get like overpowered. You might, like, you might have the training, you might know, like, if I do XYZ, it can come out, But let's say that you are 100-pound person against someone that is 200 pounds. And just like the brute strength of that 200-pound person, you know, could very easily like overpower someone that is 100 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely situational, right? Like you
Right,
just won't.
exactly. It's situational, but
I mean,
I'm saying like it could even just be like brute strength, right? Like,
yeah, I think, I mean, and then you also have to think about like, okay, let's say that there's this person who teaches self-defense, right? They've been doing self-defense for like years and years and years, and then multiple people attack this person. Are they going to be able to get out of that? Probably not, right?
yeah.
Now you're outnumbered. So I think having the knowledge and skills is really, really good, right? It's a really great baseline, but it doesn't necessarily mean that nothing bad will ever happen. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have to use these skills. It doesn't mean that just because you know how to use these skills that, you know, you're guaranteed safety. It's like, no, there's so many factors that go into it. And if you're in a situation to the point where you have to use those self-defense skills, like you've already failed because there are so many other things that have already gone wrong for you to get into that situation. You know, like you weren't situationally aware maybe, or you know, you made a bad decision going someplace where, you know, you shouldn't have. Maybe you didn't listen to your gut instinct, whatever it may be, right? Like there's already been bad choices made up to the point to where now you have to defend yourself. And those choices and whatever led to you to that, it may have been in your control and it may not have been in your control, right? It's so situational, it's hard to say.
Yeah. And those bad choices might not necessarily have been bad choices in the moment, right? Like it could have just been like you were like in broad daylight walking to your car, right? Like being like put in a bad situation doesn't necessarily like mean that I think that the bad choices, like you said, were in your control, right? It could have just been like it was. Yeah. It's not that you made the wrong choice. Like I'm going to go grocery shopping, and that's a bad choice, right?
I mean, it was. It was outside of your control to know. Yeah, exactly. And you were going to say something?
So it leads me to a follow-up question. Do you think that, to a certain extent, males have blind confidence?
Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think to a certain extent they do. Just because we had the conversation in regards to that a lot of times males don't feel the fear and they don't feel like the concern and things along those lines because they are muscular or they are built or anything along those lines. And then I asked the follow-up question, well, as a female who may have self-defense like knowledge and things along those lines, do you feel like you would feel more confident or allay any of those fears? And I feel like it was a resounding kind of no to that. Whereas like males, it would be a yes. Well, so do you feel like it's a little bit more like blind confidence that I'm a male, I'm bigger, so that I'm just going to be able just to do what like defend myself in any situation?
I don't know if men do have that, to be honest. I also, yeah, because I don't know, right? Like I'm not a guy. I'm also not like what if you are small, like a guy that is smaller? What if you are a guy that is thinner? What if you are a guy that is taller but thinner? What if you are a guy that has some sort of maybe not visible disability? What, you know, like I can't say that men as a whole, as a general statement, do have that blind confidence. I think it is situational. Just like my confidence in am I going to be able to get out of this situation alive also is situational, right? Like I think it depends. It depends on what's going on. It depends on what my skills are and what's going on. It depends on what my resources are at that moment. Right.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I like if my training allows me to be able to get out of this situation, then I might be more confident. Maybe my training makes sure that I'm not dead. Maybe my training makes sure that I'm able to run away. Maybe my training allows me to remember something to be able to catch a perpetrator, right? Maybe it really depends on what that training is. Is it, and how often I use that training and practice those skills and things like that. So I'm going to say, no, I don't think that guys have blind confidence. I think that guys also get scared and concerned and worried about in situations. I think fear is a very human thing. It's a very, well, animals also get afraid, right? Like, I think it's just, fear is a very normal experience for everyone. And I think that like the reason why the dark does scare, like does leave us a little uneasy, is because we are not nocturnal creatures, right? Like, and as humans, we do have to sleep longer than a lot of other creatures, and so that leaves us unprotected. If if we lived like not in houses, and like, how is it that we do protect ourselves when we are sleeping and sleeping for so long?
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think I have had multiple men tell me that, the reason why they are seeking like to learn self-defense and, take fighting classes and all that is because there's like society. I'm not gonna say every man has said this, but I have had several men tell me this, but that, society just kind of expects men to be these protectors, and they're like, well, I don't know. Like, they're not born with this knowledge. And so some guys do take, like boxing, jujitsu, judo, karate, whatever it may be, just to feel a little bit more confident that if they do have to defend themselves or even another person, that they're able to do so. I think that some men do have blind confidence that they can, you know, beat someone or overpower someone. And I can say just from personal experience, um, I haven't done very much training in jujitsu, but I have done some training, and I have gone up against like guys that are like brand new in class. They show up and they pick me because they're like, oh, I can't go up against a guy, but I'm going to go up against this tiny girl. And then they learn very quickly that I can put them down. Right. And they try to use their strength to overpower me, but my technique overpowers them. And again, I'm a white belt. Like, I am not in any sense of the word, like skilled or like have immense amount of training in jujitsu. But those guys that do have that overconfidence, they learn very quickly that someone with like skills and training can definitely overpower them, no matter like how big or small the person is. But I don't think that all men have a blind confidence. And at the same time, I also don't think that all women don't have blind confidence. I have met girls who have taken like a cardio kickboxing class, and they're just like, oh, I'm ready to get in a fight. Right. And then they don't realize, like, yeah, it's super fun to sit there and like kick and punch like a punching bag, but it's not that fun to get punched back. It's just not, and it's like, um, yeah, getting punched, you're just like, oh, okay, this sucks. Like, and it can be very, I don't want to say disorienting, but
Jarring.
it can definitely, yeah, it's jarring. Thank you. Yes, that is the perfect.
Because I feel like the first time I ever got punched in the face in boxing, was just like, oh, that's what getting punched in the face feels like. Like,
Yeah, you're just like, well, that's not pleasant.
no, it's not.
Yeah, and so I think that there are females out there that have that blind confidence, right? Because they feel very confident punching a bag or perhaps like practicing like in class, but not really going up against, I guess, like sparring or, making it a little bit more of like a real scenario. And so you do also find that blind confidence in women. I think it depends on the person. It really depends on the person, how they were raised, what their beliefs are, what they're afraid of, what they're not afraid of.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Levi, you've been kind of quiet. Do you have any thoughts?
No, not really. I'm not an expert on these self-training classes. Haven't taken any, so
So,
don't really have
as a
something to
person
speak
that
about.
hasn't really taken any self-defense classes, would you say that are you afraid to like go out by yourself? Do you think that you know, do you feel less prepared to be able to defend yourself if you had to, or is that fear there for you, or do you feel pretty confident that you're usually in like a safe situation? And
I usually feel like I'm in a safe situation because when I'm out, I'm usually with my friends or on a call with someone, or with family, and I will always have someone to kind of have my back during that situation. I'm not really usually outside past sundown, so it's never really been a problem for me. I'm still pretty afraid of what was going to happen outside if I ever do land in that situation. But I know that if it does happen where I am in that situation, I can just break their nose and jolt.
okay, so you have some self-defense training, see?
Yes.
Nice.
So yeah. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering, even if you do have that training, how experienced do you have to be that when you're in that situation, if it's like a 2-on-1, a 3-on-1, how much experience would you have to do your best to keep yourself safe? Like, be able to get free for a second, for even just a millisecond, to help yourself to get out of that situation. If it's multiple people onto only you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Levi. So I would have to say that if it's multiple people against one person, that's a really bad situation to be in. Like, at that point, I hope you have a weapon that you are familiar with, that you can use to at least give you
Leverage.
some time, or some sort of leverage, even just for a second. One thing that I was taught in my self-defense training is that if you have the chance to walk away, walk away. So if these people are intent on like beating you up, if you can run away, run away. But that also leads to a different kind of training. Are you trained, not trained, but are you fit enough to be able to run away and outrun these people, right? Do you have the stamina for that? Like, it's multiple people coming after you. How far do you have to run? How long do you have to run for? How fast do you have to run, right?
What's the terrain?
Exactly. There's all these factors, right? And so I think part of it has to do with luck, being able to get out of that situation, but I also think that just being able, so the skill portion comes into play, being able to see like, okay, there's an opening here, or you know, if I'm able to take down this person, that'll give me enough time to be able to exit like this way. So being able to see those opportunities to give yourself an exit plan. They always say bring a gun to a knife fight. Why? Because it's better to have a gun when someone else has a knife, right? But you don't want to show up with the knife when there's a gun, right? Like you're just bound to lose. And so that's kind of the situation when it's like multiple people on one person.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
I agree with you, but like, imagine you're at a knife fight. Like, imagine you're at a gunfight and you bring out a knife. That person does not know how to use a gun just at all. Like, they even load it before. And so you just win, and you're like,
Hopefully they're really
this
good
is
at
a lot
throwing
easier
knives
than I
then.
thought it would be.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it does have to be said, whatever weapon you have to defend yourself, make sure you practice with it and you know how to use it. I'm not going around telling people like, hey, grab a knife and start stabbing people, right? Like, definitely not. But, you know, if you have pepper spray or something on you, or you have like a taser, just understand that weapon can be used against you, right? And know like you need to be okay with understanding that that weapon could be used against you if it's taken away from you. And you also need to know how to use that weapon, because if you don't, it can very easily be taken away from you and be used against you. But Anne, I haven't heard much from you. Any thoughts?
Well, I think that something to point out too is definition of what it means to get out of the situation. Like, are you getting out of the situation unscathed? Are you getting out of the situation like
Not dead.
not dead? You know? And so I think that having that definition is also important too, because if you're getting into an altercation, more than likely there's going to be some type of like injury or trauma or something that ends up happening. So I think it's important to note that as well.
I also think so, Elfie, I'm kind of reminded back when we did that event in San Francisco, and like it is, and like we were being chased and we are trying to run up the hill, and my adrenaline was pumping so hard that I couldn't run. Like it was almost like my body was in overdrive, and the person that was chasing us was walking, and I couldn't run. Like I was like it made me out of breath with the adrenaline. Like the adrenaline pumping like made me not be able to run, made me not be able to breathe. And it was such a crazy feeling to feel like I have no control over my body because the adrenaline's pumping so hard. And it was kind of a trippy situation to like feel that feeling, because I've never like been been chased with a consequence at the end if like we got caught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, and things like that will come up, right? Like, you might be like super skilled. You've done your training, like you're fit, you can do all these things, and then you get in the situation and your body's like, nope, this is how we're gonna react, and you're like, right? And like it sucks, but those are factors that, you know, I mean, obviously, like we did that event and you learned that about yourself. So now, like, you know how your body reacts, and it's something that, you know, you can work through and plan for. But
Me just thinking about it made me like clammy.
yeah, but you know, but it's like something that if you hadn't done that event, you wouldn't have known that unless you were put into like that terrible situation, right? And I think the scenario for that was it's a riot and you're trying to get out of the riot and people are like chasing you. And so it's like, you know, you have to go find a safe place to get to.
No, we had to get back to home base, remember?
Oh yeah, well that was like your safe place.
Yeah, we had to get back to home base. And yeah, it was basically like adult tag, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it was like adult tag, and the person that was it, you didn't want to get captured before getting to home base because there was a consequence if you did get captured.
Yeah, but you know, it's a great call up where you really don't know how like you're gonna react when you're in that situation, until you're in that situation. And all you can do is control the controllables and not worry about trying to control uncontrollables, right? Like
Yeah.
you can train, you can work out, you can do all these things, and then you just have to hope for the best. But things like that happen, and if it happens, then you have to work through it, or you just may end up like in just a bad situation. And it sucks, but it happens.
Yeah. No, it was kind of crazy, like not being able to control my heart, which in turn I wasn't able to control my lungs. And I just went into like full panic. Yeah. Which is not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah.
Like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an interesting event.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It was fun. I learned a lot.
Yeah, a lot. But and I also think like putting yourself in safe situations so that way you can learn about yourself and your body and like what are your gaps, I think is also important, right? Like I feel like that event was a safe situation that allowed me to learn a lot about myself, and it sounds like it allowed you to learn a lot about yourself too. Um yeah.
Also, anybody who's listening into this, please note that do not try use weapons on other people when you're practicing. Please don't.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you for the great call out. I did a CPR class a little while ago, like a year or so ago. But when I showed up, there was like some pre-work before you can get certified, before you can show up for the certification class. They have like an online portion, and they teach you about like, okay, like this is like the theory behind giving someone CPR. This is a theory behind an AED machine, how it works, right? And you work through like online scenarios. And so I show up for the certification. We're practicing on dummies, and we were taking a break, and I'm in the bathroom, and this girl like walks into the bathroom, and she's like, what do you think about the class? I'm like, oh, it's really cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm learning a lot. It's really great being able to know these, this skill. And she goes, yeah, but don't you think it feels different like doing CPR on a dummy than like on a real person? And I was like, oh, I honestly don't know, because I have never actually done CPR on a real person. Like, I've only done it on dummies. And then she says to me, oh, well, my boyfriend was nice enough to let me practice CPR on him. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh. Like, you should not be practicing on a live person unless they really need it.
Yeah. Guys, please do not try this stuff at home. Go to a class.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes.
Especially to someone
it's good to note.
Who's your boyfriend, a family member, a complete stranger. Please do not like randomly stab them or tase them or pepper spray them. Do CPR.
Also, if you're going to take a self-defense class, choose your partners wisely and make sure that person actually stops when the instructor says stop. Because I was in a knife fighting seminar with a little electric knife, and my partner did not stop when the instructor said stop.
Oh God! Like,
well,
don't have like a bully.
I did not get tased, so I did a good job. But
someone got a little knife happy.
They got a little knife happy and did not stop when the instructor said stop. But they're like, whoa, 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 and they still kept on going for
like
another couple
of minutes. If you're attending the same class as like a person who hurt you, please do not choose them to be your partner.
Well, I think
revenge.
So I think that like when people start off in self-defense classes, it's a scary situation. Most people walking into those classes are joining because they don't know and they want to learn. Mm-hmm. They're scared, or they had something terrible happen to them, right? Yes. There might be other reasons, but those are the ones I've seen that are most common. Mm-hmm. And new people tend to be a little bit more squirrely, I think is the best way to put it. And it's because like you don't never having been in that class or in that environment, right? Like you're just like, how hard is like this person that I'm partnering up with going to go? And so new people tend to go a little bit harder, right? Because they're just like, well, what happens if I don't? And so I think it's up to the number one, it's up to the instructor to make sure that they're pairing this new person with an experienced person to make them feel comfortable and understand, like, hey, this is how we behave in class. Because there's no way for them to know that first day in class, right? And I think also it's up to the instructor to really understand the motivation of that student and like any fears that they may have so that that can be addressed and they can kind of talk to them like about how what they should expect from class. But that doesn't always happen. And so I think part of learning self-defense, like you do get hurt, right? Learning how to defend yourself, like you are going to get hurt, especially at least in jiu-jitsu, like if you're not tapping because you're just like, no, I can get out of this. Like you really have to leave your ego at the door. You have to. And that's where I've seen a lot of injuries happen is people's egos get the best of them. But there are people that just like along the same line, there are people that just go hard and sometimes they feel like they have something to prove. And they aren't good partners, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the people where the instructors kind of have to step in and talk to them. But if this person is a detriment to the class, then they need to remove that person, right? If they're not willing to change. So I wouldn't say be afraid of someone that's injured you. Like a lot of times it's an accident. And it's rarely intentional that people injure you on purpose. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I also feel like a lot of people don't realize their strength, like just like brute strength. Yeah, because like you said, a lot of people haven't been in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like that's part of learning about yourself. That's why you're there, right? To learn about yourself as well as learning like these new skills.
So that story, I laugh about it now. Like in a situation, like I was like, I don't want to get teased. So, but it was something that I learned about myself. It was something that I learned about my partner. I wouldn't say that my partner was a bad partner. It was just, in the moment, the adrenaline pumps and you have that experience. And I mean, it was a really good learning experience overall.
So. And have you ever been tased?
No.
Have any of you guys been tased?
Mm-mm. Have you?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like fun. I've been tased in a dream. Does that count?
No. I mean, I haven't been tased with like a taser, but I've been tased with like those knives.
Oh, with the knives?
Yeah. No. I've been tased with those.
Luckily, I have not.
It's actually not that bad. It's like I mean, I know this sounds horrible, but like that feeling, like I don't know, like you touch
like
something.
When you put a battery to your tongue.
Never done that, so I cannot say.
Yeah. Please elaborate and never try that at home.
No, it's like that feeling like when you touch something and you get shocked.
Oh, okay.
Feels like. Yeah, it's not. It's like it's unpleasant. I think not knowing what it's gonna feel like is like way worse than when you actually get shocked. Because you get shocked and you're just like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. But it's like the lead up to it. You're like, ah! It's the fear that actually is worse than the actual shock itself. All right, guys, we are coming up on time here. I'm gonna keep tradition strong here because Levi always likes to end it on a positive note. Levi, is there any positive thing that you want to end it on?
The situation isn't really that positive. Yeah, let me think.
Okay, well, how about this? Um, no matter what gender you identify with, male, female, non-binary, whatever it is. I don't know all the genders, so I apologize. But whatever gender you identify with, just know that there are classes out there where, you can learn self-defense. There are definitely people out there that are willing to help. Just, don't be afraid to go out there and learn whatever it is that you want to learn to keep yourself safe. Levi, Willow, Ann, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it is important to make sure that like you understand what does drive that fear behind, like from the beginning we were talking about the dark and it kind of led into self-defense, right? And I think like understanding where that fear comes from and being able to get the tools to be able to make yourself less fearful about the situation, because you don't want that fear to lead your life and prevent you from having good experiences. So it's important to be able to have those tools in your toolbox.
Nice.
My 2 cents are that everybody gets afraid. Like, you shouldn't feel bad about the fact that you feel afraid, no matter like your age, your gender, anything. Like, we're kind of all on the same page. It's a universal human experience, and it's not something that you should feel shameful about. And if it's something that does concern you, just make sure that you're taking the steps to address it. And that there's nothing shameful about that either. And if anybody makes you feel ashamed of it, then they may not be the right people to have in your life.
Any of you guys, Elfie and Willow, got any happy experiences that happened in the dark? Just to end it off on a good note.
Stargazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stargazing.
Stargazing's always a good one.
Looking at like really cool planetary alignments with like the telescope. That was pretty cool. Getting to like see the moon up close, that's pretty cool too. Or like shooting stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bioluminescent things
Algae.
in the water. That's also really cool.
I enjoy seeing like the nightlife, and no, I'm not talking about like clubs. No, I'm talking about like like the animals that come out at night, especially the cute little possums that come out. I love them.
Yep, so many possums.
They're my favorite. I name all of them.
Or like the bats. Like, it's so cool when you see like a bunch of bats. You're like, what? I hope I don't get bit. Not that I've ever gotten bit by a bat, but you never know. But yeah, I really like seeing the nightlife. Or even like when you're camping, you're in your tent and like you're just listening to the sounds of the forest.
Yeah.
And it's something that is, you just don't hear that in the, right? Like when you're living in the suburbs or the city, it's definitely different sounds that you hear, and the things that you see at night are definitely different. It's really cool to see how the world changes.
I have to agree with
Bonfires and s'mores. Sorry?
Yeah.
What did you say, Levi?
Yeah, s'mores, most definitely.
S'mores at night.
Bonfires and s'mores. Yeah.
Except for raccoons. Those are terrifying.
No one likes raccoons. Raccoons.
I like raccoons. I just don't like possums.
I think also haunted houses are a lot better at night.
True.
That is a positive if you like to get scared by haunted houses.
Yes. Or
Yeah,
you just like scary stuff. There you go.
It is a whole vibe. You're right.
Yep. Totally agree.
Halloween.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Strange, Dark, and Related podcast. If you have any thoughts about anything we talked about, or you have your own stories to share, feel free to include that in the comment section. And yeah, or just reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to hear your stories.
Yeah.
Until next time, bye guys.
Bye.
Bye.